What if the version of you in the glass learns faster than you do? And tonight, it is a lesson behind your eyes that it wants to pass back, quietly, before the bell rings again. Welcome back to my channel, Whispering Abyss. Tonight, I have something truly haunting for you. And yes, it lives in places you thought were safe. Classrooms after hours. Bathrooms that hum with fluorescent breath. A trophy case that fogs from the inside when no one is near. Do not look too long, or you may notice who blinks first. From eerie voices riding the air vents to faces that keep attending after the student has gone home. Every story here is a mystery waiting to unfold, and each one leaves a mark you will catch later in the corner of school window. Which story creeped you out the most? Tell us in the comments, so I know what followed you back to your room tonight. Story 1. The dance studio mirror that spoke my name the first time the mirror spoke. It used my name the way a teacher does when you've been caught moving before the music. I was alone in Studio B after hours, that stretch of building that smells like rosin and mop water, where the vents make a thin winter hiss, even in September. The floor was cool under my bare feet. My scuffed ballet shoes waited by the stereo with their tired, gray ribbons. The glass along the wall showed everything brighter than it should have been, as if someone had turned up a second sun behind me. I told myself it was just the overheads humming hotter than usual, but I kept glancing over my shoulder anyway. I had reasons to stay late. The fall showcase was 2 weeks away, and I needed to prove to Ms. Hart I was still principal material after the ankle sprain. There was a scholarship attached to that solo. There was also pride, which I wish I could say I wasn't carrying like a second backpack. And there was Ray, my friend and sometimes rival, who had already told me I looked stiff at the bar. I laughed it off then, but her words had slipped between my ribs. If you've ever been called out in a room full of mirrors, you know the echo can last. I kept the music low to avoid the custodian's rounds. The old stereo stuttered when I hit play, like a breath caught in the middle of a word. Warm strings rose, the kind that make you hold your neck longer than normal. I traced the first 8 counts, the turn, the lift of the left arm, the breath. Tina, I thought, keep the shoulders soft. That's my name. If I tell you this in a whisper, maybe you'll hear what I didn't at first. A smear cut across the glass, just above my shoulder. Not a big one, just a faint crescent that the last class had missed with the spray. It bothered me because it sat exactly where my face would be if I tilted my head. I made a mental note to clean it before I left. You think you'll remember, and that mistake is a kind of seed. At count 16, the stereo hiccuped. The strings cracked like ice, then caught again. I exhaled, annoyed, and tried to ride it through. The vents ticked. The lights were set to shut off at 11, which on most nights felt far away. That night, the clock over the door insisted it was close. 10:40, 10:41. I told myself to stop watching, which made me watch harder. When the first wrong thing happened, it felt so small I swallowed it. On the turn, I saw my reflection lag by maybe half a breath. Like cheap video, I stopped. The mirror showed me stopping exactly when I did, which you have to admit is rude for a thing that lives to copy. I laughed out loud. Okay, I need sleep. There's a specific kind of courage that is really just pretending for yourself. I recommitted to the counts. I stepped into the phrase again and saw, clear as a metronome tick, that my reflection's left thumb was slightly out when mine was tucked in. It was a tiny difference, but small differences are how you learn you're in trouble. I told myself that Ray had messed with the glass somehow, the way she had once written little ghosts with dry erase marker to freak out freshmen. I decided to be amused, which is not the same as safe. The smear on the mirror caught the overhead glare and turned into the ghost of a handprint. It wasn't the right angle to be mine. The fingers were too long. I leaned closer, breath fogging. The glass was cold, colder than the room. Cold like a place. I pressed the tips of my fingers to the faint palm. Mine didn't line up. I told myself the custodian had big hands. I told myself a lot of things that didn't fit. I practiced the center combo, letting the music drape over me. At count 24, the stereo skipped again. Only this time the movement on the other side didn't wait to catch up. My reflection continued a slow develop that I hadn't even started, lifting the leg higher, higher, with a kind of grace that made my stomach pinch. My hands trembled. Ray, I slid it out halfway with my nail, then let it be. One thing at a time, Tina. Focus. The clock over the door said 10:47. The lights clicked a notch dimmer, as if to teach me the sound of time. Why did I think of the custodian's keys as they jingled at the other end of a hallway? I couldn't see. I tried to leave then, casually, like a dancer choosing water over sweat. The emergency exit by the stereo had a bar you push. It had always stuck. I pushed it. It stuck. I put both palms on the bar and leaned in. It thudded hard and refused me, as if it knew me by name. I laughed again, smaller, and let my hands fall. The echo of the bar's thud made the stereo pop. The music fell out of the air. For a second, the studio had only my breath and the vents. That's when the whisper came. Tina. It was soft and close, not through the stereo, not through the door. It vibrated near my right ear from the direction of the mirror. I turned so fast I almost fell. My reflection had not turned. She still face front, chest open, chin level like a dancer about to bow. She looked proud of me in a way that didn't feel kind. I told myself the vent was angled. I told myself Ray had found a way to stream audio through the ancient wires. You can tell yourself anything if the room is bright enough. I grabbed the paper and unfolded it. My name was written on the inside. Not like Miss Hart writes it with quick, slanted letters. This was blocky and neat. The N was reversed, like a child's or like a reflection of someone careful. Under my name, there was a time. 11. Just that, 11 o'clock. I glanced at the clock. 10:51. The lights ticked again, a sigh of ballast. The note was warm from my hand. The glass was cold like it had been outside all day. I checked my phone. 2%. It had been at 40 when I came in. The battery icon drained in one fascinated blink to 1%, then flatlined with the politeness of a closing eye. No calls, no text to prove I was here. I told myself the outlet behind the stereo could charge it. The stereo's plug was a fat, two-pronged thing with tape around the base. I pulled it out to make room, and then remembered too late that I still needed the music. The room exhaled into a louder kind of quiet. The vents kept their winter whisper. Somewhere far down the hall, a door closed. It sounded like the building clearing its throat. I plugged my phone in anyway, and it lay on the wood like a sleeping beetle. The mirror showed me bending, showed me fussing. The smear convexed in the light and became a handprint again, as if the glass had more memory than I did. I stood up and told myself to finish the phrase, to prove to my body that I was in charge. I set my shoes aside, though I could feel their scuffed leather wanting my feet like they were kind of luck. I lifted my arms. The mirror lifted too. We both breathed. At count 12, the reflection didn't rise on releve with me. She stayed flat. By count 16, she floated up, slow and sweet, like her floor had lighter gravity. Stop, I said to nothing. My voice sounded thin, like it hadn't had water. Stop copying wrong. That's when her lips moved. They moved way too late. They formed my name without sound. The whisper came again, not from her mouth, but from right behind my ear. Tina, please. It said please. The word clung. I know how it sounds. I know how easily your mind will protect you. I protected mine by getting angry. If this is you, Ray, I said, I swear. The red herring arrived fully dressed. Ray had keys sometimes to help Miss Hart. Ray liked pranks right up to the line where they stick. Ray had once recorded herself breathing into the vents to make a ghost for freshmen. My anger had something to sit on while my fear waited its turn. I crouched to see if the mirror had space behind it. I pressed my face to the cold and peered along the lower edge. The metal trim sat tight to the wall. No gap, no void where a friend could hide and breathe and whisper. The cold bit my cheek so sharply I flinched, and when I did, the reflection didn't. She kept her cheek pressed to nothing, eyes on mine, as if she liked the temperature better where she was. The clock said 10:56. I tried the emergency exit again. This time I used my shoulder. The bar gave half an inch, then thudded back like a thing closing its lips. The immediate consequence of wanting out is that the room gets tighter. I felt sweat climb my spine. The vents carried a sound under the hiss. The beginning of a melody like the stereo had died, but the song kept living in the ductwork. That should not have been possible. That was how the room started to teach me its rules. I made a choice then. I picked up my scuffed shoes and started lacing them. Don't smash the mirror, I told myself. Shards and blood mean MS. Heart's anger means scholarship gone. Me and my mother telling me I throw chances away. Don't call for help because it would hear you on an empty floor. Stay and finish. Finish before 11. Finish before the lights go. If you've ever stayed because leaving would make the story real, you know the choice I made. The minute hand kissed 10:57. I stepped into the phrase with more force, making the wooden floor speak. My reflection matched measure for measure now, like we'd decided to try again. We rose. We turned. We lifted our chins to that imaginary second sun. I almost smiled. Then in the cross step, my ankle, the one I'd sprained, rolled the smallest bit. I corrected. My reflection did not. She rolled all the way through the pain I didn't feel and found a fuller line. She did it with a kind of relief that made me realize she was practicing a body she didn't own. I broke counts and stumbled back. The whisper came again. Please, Tina. It sounded less like a command and more like someone checking my name off a list. I think that scared me most. The note in my pocket warmed like a coal. I took it out to use my fear like paper. The reversed and glared. I realized, with the kind of clarity that only arrives when it's too late to use it, that the letters looked like mine if you held a phone to the mirror. The handwriting was mine, but remembered by glass. I tried the hallway door instead of the emergency exit. It was better lit out there. I pulled it open an inch, enough to feel cooler air. Then I saw her. The reflection stood just inside the hallway in the mirror's version of the room, shoulder against the doorframe, one hand on the bar. She smiled, gentle and new, like someone tasting a word for the first time. The door of my world pressed back against my palm with silent weight. It didn't open any farther. She raised her hand and made a little come here gesture at herself. At 10:58, the lights dimmed to a silver dusk the building saves for speedwalkers. My breath sounded too loud. I plugged the stereo back in by feel. The cord sparked, and the speakers woke with a soft body sigh. The music returned warped, like a cassette that had sat on a radiator. The warped stretch counts in a way that made you either play along or fall down. The reflection seemed pleased, as if the room had tuned finally to her key. I took a rosin bag from the windowsill and patted the floor where my feet would land in the turn. I don't know why I thought of it as chalk. Maybe I wanted a circle. I drew a rough, sticky ring on the wood with the powder, a small stage inside the bigger one, a place that might keep my body honest. It's superstitious to believe in circles, but dance is full of them. I looked at the mirror and saw my reflection mark the same circle, except her ring was a shade wider, like she was giving herself a little more room to breathe. 10:59. The room tasted like pennies. The vents sang a thin little countermelody. The mirror felt colder to look at than to touch. I stepped into my circle and lifted my arms. Ready, I said, but I said it to you, because for a second I felt like someone was listening the way you are now. We began together. The count stretched as if owned by a slow clock. Beat 1, the breath. Beat 2, the lift. Beat 3, the turn that brings your face close enough to your other face to count freckles. My reflection was with me until she wasn't. In the turn, she took a path I'd never learned, a diagonal I'd never seen. She ended inside my line like she had found a road through me. Her lips moved, wrong on the count. Now, the overheads let go. Darkness didn't slam, it laid down. The exit signs held their green like two new moons. In the sudden less light, the mirror did not dim. It retained a saucer brightness as if lit from its own sky. My breath fogged, and my fog was answered. It was answered from the other side first, a quick silver veil before mine could bloom. Cold glass. The handprint that had been a smear flared pale, then cleared. My name breathed past my ear, impossibly kind. Please. I put my palms on the mirror. I felt night ice. She raised her hands to meet mine, but with a grace I didn't know, like she was taking mercy. There was no rational, adult thought left. Only a dancer's thought, which is stillness inside motion. It told me to decide. Smash the mirror with the stereo's heavy remote and turn my life into shards, or stay. and step into the phrase she had said, and see if the glass would change its mind about which of us was real. I stayed. There are choices you can't undo because undoing them would undo you. You will ask what changed hands first. I think it was weight. When our palms met the glass, my body felt a tiny pull forward, like the room had an elevator and someone below had pressed up. The cold stopped feeling external. It felt like it was in my blood. I leaned just enough that my reflection's shoulders squared as if catching someone. She looked over mine at the exit sign. She smiled like the bar was not jammed at all. The music warped into a key my bones recognized. It was the opening phrase of my solo, but it was reversed, the notes sucking inward like breath. The vents carried it up the duct to some place that sounded like a throat. The circle of rosin around my feet held me until it didn't. I slid half an inch, as if the floor had been dusted from below. My right hand warmed where the reflection's palm touched. That detail doesn't make sense because the glass had been cold. I told myself the glass only remembers temperature, and someone had warmed it before me. Her mouth formed my name one last time, and this time the whisper came faintly from inside the glass itself, like you hear the sea in a shell. Tina. Then she exhaled. The mirror fogged from her side, and not mine. In the fog, a finger drew 3 letters. Not my name. Hi. The fog cleared. The lights clicked. The studio let in a fraction of dull power as if reconsidering. The clock said 11. The note in my pocket cooled like it had learned patience. I stumbled back from the glass. My shoes felt too tight, though I hadn't tightened them. My breath came hard. In the mirror, my reflection stepped out of her circle just ahead of me, a half breath early, like she was leading for once. She walked to the emergency exit and put her palm flat. The bar in my world moved under my eyes, not under my hand. It depressed smoothly and opened the door into a slice of hallway light. She looked at me across the space between our worlds. She lifted her hand in a little wave, then let the door in her world close gently in mine. No shards, no screaming, just the softest click, the quiet after a good turn. My phone vibrated where it had been dead seconds ago. It woke to a notification I hadn't asked for, new device connected. The stereo hummed like someone had just replugged it. The music, right side forward now, resumed at the bar before the one I'd left. It was helpful in a way that made me want to cry. I tried the emergency exit again out of defiance, and it thudded shut, stuck, loyal to the building's habit. I laughed, and the sound broke into 3 parts. I told myself I was fine. I told myself I'd tell Ms. Hart about electrical problems and the need for a new latch. I told myself Ray's prank had been brilliant and that someday I would admit it. Telling yourself is a kind of dance. You turn, you return, you point your toe at old ground. I cleaned the smear with the studio's blue spray because I couldn't stand seeing the handprint ghost at my height. It came off easy, too easy. The rag smelled like fake lemons and Thursday afternoons. The glass beneath it felt a degree warmer than the rest. When I finished, the mirror looked perfect, like a surface that had never been touched. Except, in the corner, almost outside the frame, a half moon of fog lingered, as if undecided. I blinked and it was gone. On the way to the hallway door, I passed my shoes and stopped. The scuffs on the toes didn't look the same. They were reversed, left where they used to be right, as if the wearer had migrated overnight. I told myself my eyes were tired. I picked one up and it sat oddly in my hand, heavier, like a hand-me-down from a twin. I shrugged because you can't live at that pitch too long. I gathered my things. I told the mirror good night, which is either politeness or surrender, and either way, it sounded like me. The hallway was empty. The motion lights stumbled on behind me in staggered squares. I locked the studio even though my hands shook a little and the key bit back. When I looked up, the long pane of the trophy case across from Studio B had fogged from the inside, a slow, even veil. My breath did not reach it. The air was still. The case cleared itself like a wiped window. On the glass, inside, someone had written a time with a fingertip. 11 o'clock. It was not a note. It was a habit. I took a step back to see if anyone else had seen it, though the hall was mine alone. If this is where you want me to give you a mundane answer, I'm sorry. I went home. I slept badly. In the morning, my mother called me from the kitchen to laugh about how I'd flipped my cereal spoon in my left hand. "I thought you were right-handed," she said. I am. It took me a day to notice that the callus on my ring finger had softened, and the one on my left thumb was pink and hard. Maybe I just practiced too much that night, I told myself. Maybe nerves migrate. When I returned to the studio the next day, Ms. Hart praised me for finally finding softness in my wrists. "You've stopped fighting the phrase," she said. She touched my shoulder. "It looks like you've let someone else lead you." She smiled. I wanted to tell her everything, but I also wanted my solo. I wanted the scholarship. I wanted Ray to stop looking at me like I was dancing with a partner no one else could see. Wanting is a kind of silence. I left the mirror alone for a week. Every night, the building clicked its lights off at 11. Every night, my phone, which has never been good with batteries, drained faster after 10:45 if I was in Studio B. Once, as I tied my scuffed shoes, the stereo stuttered and gave me the reverse phrase again, a backward ribbon. I could almost breathe. It felt like a friend clearing their throat behind glass. I kept my eyes on the floor. You know how we try to outweight the part of the story that knows us? On the Friday before the showcase, Ray cornered me in the hall. "You went home through the east stairs last night," she said. "We all saw you on the camera feed when Ms. Hart checked the practice hours." I hadn't. I had left through the main doors because the east stairwell creeps me out. Ray pulled her phone and showed me the grainy clip. There I was, ponytail, bag, scuffed shoes slung over my shoulder, walking like the floor had forgotten its squeak. In my left hand, the keys swung. I don't carry keys to the East Wing. Miss Hart does. I laughed and told Ray there must be a delay on the system. She didn't think it was funny. She tapped the progress bar on the video. "Look," she said. She smiles at the camera. I watched my not-self glance up. The smile was small and new. It looked like I had been practicing. My stomach went cold. Cold like glass. I handed Ray her phone and told her if this was a joke, it was a bad one. That is how you keep a thread from pulling. You say no. You tie a knot with a laugh. The night before the show, Ms. Hart asked if I wanted to run in the big studio. I said I preferred B. She cocked her head, but didn't push. 11, she said casually as I reached for the door. "Don't break the timer." I nodded, a student polite to rules. Inside, the mirror waited with its bright. The vents were already singing a little, even without music. The note I had folded and unfolded lived in my pocket again, as if I were a person who always carries proof of something no one else saw. I won't tell you that anything dramatic happened. I'll tell you the door stayed jammed until 11 on the dot, and then it worked like every other door in the world. I'll tell you the smear never returned, and still I kept wiping that spot, as if keeping a place warm for a palm. I'll tell you that I danced better than I had in months, that my ankle remembered nothing, that the backwards phrase slid under my forward one like a second river. I'll tell you that in my final bow, I looked in the mirror and saw, just before my head tipped, a second me bow slightly earlier, gracious, rehearsed. If you've ever met your own eyes in a window at night and felt the outside look back first, you know what I saw. If you haven't, I hope you don't. The scholarship letter came a week later. "Congratulations," Ms. Hart wrote in blue ink. "You finally let the room teach you." I read it twice and thought of the exit bar moving under a hand that wasn't mine. I thought of the rosin circle and the way I slid as if the floor had aired out its lungs. I thought of the note with my backward end and the way a mirror remembers handwriting without caring which side you're on. Then I set the letter on the table and breathed on the kitchen window just to see if anything would write back. Nothing did. But a minute later, as I walked down the hall to my room, the glass in the picture frame by the door fogged from the inside and cleared. It left one little dot in the lower right corner, like a note taking its place. I looked back at the kitchen window to see if I had imagined it. In the reflection, I saw myself turn my head before I turned my head. If you ever practice alone, keep an eye on the clock over the door. If you ever find a note with your name on it in unfamiliar handwriting, hold it to the mirror and see what it wants. And if the glass touches back when you touch it first, don't smash it unless you're willing to live with the pieces. Some music keeps playing even when you pull the plug. Some doors are only jammed for one of you. Now, before we move on, take a breath. If you've ever had a mirror blink a breath before you did, tell me in the comments. Story 2. Detention at 3:07 in the East Wing bathroom. The clock over the sinks in the East Wing bathroom never ticked, but it kept perfect time with me anyway. That is how I learned a clock can be broken and still in charge. When you stand under a humming light that flickers like a tired eye and a faucet counts in the dark for you, you will understand what I mean. The minute hand lived forever at 3:07, and by the end of that hour that never ended, so did I, in a way I still don't like to name. Detention was my fault, at least on paper. Ms. Qureshi said my lab report looked too polished for a student who never turns anything in early. She kept me after and handed me a spray bottle and a rag, pointed at the East Wing, and told me to make those stalls shine. The warning came like a throwaway line. The East Wing locks after the last bell. Do not get stuck there. She took my phone for focus, then changed her mind and gave it back with 2% battery, which felt worse somehow. It smelled like bleach and wet paper in there, and the light over the far stall buzzed with an uneven tremor, like someone trying not to cry. I noticed the unflushed toilet immediately. The water sat cloudy, not brown or red, just the kind of murk that looks like it learned to hold secret. On the middle stall door, letters carved by a key or a compass point read "Don't answer." It was the lazy kind of warning people right to scare freshmen. The mirror by the sinks had a crack that didn't reflect, just absorbed you. I started with the sinks to avoid the stalls because I am a coward in a sensible way. The faucet at the third basin dripped a slow, irregular beat, then found the rhythm of my pulse and kept it, which is the kind of coincidence you excuse until it keeps happening. The fluorescent tube above me hiccuped, steadied, hiccuped again. Every time it brightened, the graffiti on the stall door looked darker, not from ink, but from certainty. The clock over the mirror stared down with two black hands at 3:07, and if I asked you what time it was, you would say, obviously. My mother thinks I get into trouble because I talk back, but I think it's because I stay when I should leave. I kept scrubbing even after the hallway bell rang. That bell is supposed to mean freedom. Here, it was a steel lid sliding shut on a jar. A second later, deeper in the building, I heard the distant thunk of a magnetic lock. The East Wing doesn't lock between classes. It locks for the night. I try not to hear it. I try not to be the kind of person who thinks doors have opinions. I told myself a story to calm down. Mr. Aslam, the security guard, makes rounds at this time. His keys jingle. He likes to joke that the pipes in the East Wing knock because the building has a heartbeat. He said that to a group of us last month, and we laughed, and he wiggled the keys like a stethoscope. He'd tap the stall doors and say, "Easy there, patient." I told myself if I heard tapping, it would be him. A human man with a coffee and a radio that crackles. That's what I decided to believe, just enough to stay. The letters on the middle stall did not stay the way I left them. I swear to you they didn't. "Don't answer" grew crowded, each cut stroke deepening into grooves that caught the light. "My name is Nadia, and I swear it is not my imagination that the last four letters shifted their weight until they spelled an ADIA, like a magnet pulling filings from a pile. The A in answer thinned, and the R leaned, and suddenly I felt seen by a door. If your name has ever appeared where it shouldn't, you know the chill. I backed toward the hallway door and put my hand on the push bar. It moved a quarter inch, then hit something heavy and settled back like a shrug. The buzz from the flicker light paused in a long inhale. The faucet skipped a beat and then began again, stronger. I pressed both palms to the bar and pushed with my weight. It pushed back, polite like I had misunderstood what it was for. Overhead, the clock did not move. The second hand, which I hadn't seen before, wasn't there at all. It was just a minute hand, steadied at a lie. I went into the far stall because the walls were higher, which made me feel safer, though I don't know why. Bathrooms are fortresses until something uses the walls better than you. I latched the door, sat on the closed lid, and counted my breaths with the faucet. I told myself detention could be worse. I told myself I would clean quickly and leave whenever the door decided to love me again. The light over my stall flickered a warm low, and I almost pretended I liked it. At 3:07, the minute hand that never moves moved. I don't have a better sentence than that. The hand made a gesture, a tiny tilt forward, then settled back. The flicker light brightened perfectly, the way a stadium breath does before kickoff. A soft knock came at the middle stall door, Then my name shaped itself in the air without volume, like it had borrowed breath from a faucet. Nadia? The voice did not come from the vents. It came from where voices go when they are shy. It came from the gap under the door. I went very still. If you have ever been in a bathroom at the moment someone else comes in and your body decides silence is a survival strategy, you know the level of still I mean. The knocking came again, 3 gentle taps, not impatient, just sure. I thought of the graffiti. Don't answer. The letters that had rearranged until they admired me or accused me. The seed of the warning felt planted for me, not at me. I put a hand over my mouth and waited to feel foolish. Whoever was there breathed low. The water in the unflushed toilet at my left trembled in a tight ring, as if the floor had whispered. I should not have looked into that water. The surface held a color that wasn't in this room, a street lamp shade, a hallway light I couldn't see from where I sat. I saw a movement in the reflection that did not match the stall I was in. A figure with my backpack stepped past the sinks toward the door. The reflection showed her try the bar. It opened. She walked out into the hall that, in my world, was locked. I stood up too fast and hit my elbow on the metal coat hook. The knock didn't change. It came again, polite. Nadia, said the whisper, closer now. Or maybe my name existed as a suggestion and my brain gave a voice. The faucet beat my heart back at me. The light above the middle stall brightened like agreement. My head filled with 2 bad options. Open and be in a conversation with something that already knows my name, or stay and discover how many directions a person can be reached. Keys rattled in the hall. I seized the red herring like a life ring. Mr. Aslam? My whisper sounded like someone else's. The keys jangled, then steadied, then stilled. The voice that answered did not come from the hall. It came soft at my ear, though the wall separated us. Don't answer. It was my mother's voice with the softness scraped off. It was Ms. Qureshi's voice, deeper, pulled through a throat of water. It was also my voice, not past, not future, just yes. I chose wrong. Or I chose in a way that made another choice happen. I stayed quiet. I clamped down on every polite reflex. I waited for the knock to find me. The immediate consequence came practical. Water seeped under the stall wall in a straight line, as if someone were pouring from a hidden pitcher. It was clear, and it carried a room temperature cold that felt like hospital sheets. It reached my shoes and decided to stay. The faucet matched its rhythm. The light steadied in approval. I crouched on the toilet lid and pulled my feet up, but did not open the door. The water rose a slow half-inch, then another. Around my ankles the cold sat. The murky bowl on my left brightened a shade and showed me the sinks again. In that round mirror, I watched my own back move past the cracked mirror on the far wall and leave by a door that, for me, would not open. It was not a loop school camera feed. I could see the rise and fall of breath in my reflection's shoulders. I could see water dripping from her cuffs, even though she had not stepped in any. The clock over the sinks shivered. It clicked down a fraction, then returned to 3:07 as if deciding not to get involved. The air grew a layer thicker, like time had drafted a second skin. I swallowed a question and got a taste of metal. The knock returned, patience thinning. Nadia, please. I thought again of the graffiti. I thought of someone cutting into the paint until the door remembered a warning. Carving your own name backward into a space is a way of leaving a note you cannot later deny. I wondered who had left me this one. I wondered why I believed it was me. I stood because sitting in water feels like surrender. I unlatched the stall and lifted the door 2 inches before the latch caught on habit and crashed back into place. The knock hit the door with a little more spine. Above me, a shadow passed across the gap between stalls. It did not walk. It flowed fast and quiet where only a gymnast could go. That is how the bathroom reminded me that hiding is relevant only until it isn't. I made the only choice that felt like movement. I opened the door. The middle stall stood empty. The corridor between the partitions looked the way bathrooms look in movies when they want you to hate them. The mirror over the sinks held a long bruise of a crack that didn't show me. The clock watched me not move. The water on the floor pulled itself into my footprints and waited. I stepped forward. My wet sneakers squeaked once, loud in a room that had taken a vote against sound. Behind me, the stall I'd left closed on a gentle hinge. I could have sworn needed oil. A knock sounded from inside it. 3 polite taps. I turned and saw the bolt slide by itself into place. For a breath, I saw my own name scrawled across the door, not carved, but fog like breath had signed it. The faucet paused my heart and then offered it back. My voice came from behind the door, not where I stood. Don't answer. I recognized the tone. I am annoying when I try to save someone too late. If you have ever spoken in 2 places at once, even just in a dream, you know the type of panic that follows. I rushed the hallway door, desperate for a new kind of truth. It pushed open under my palms like it had never learned how to resist. The corridor light flooded in with disbelief. I could smell wax and dust and the faint smell of someone's lunch from hours ago. A crackle broke over a radio around the corner. Mr. Oslam's voice drifted in, tinny and annoyed. Copy. West Wing done. East Wing next. He was not here yet. He had not rattled keys at my door. The detail that disproved my red herring walked in with his voice. He was not the knock. He was not the whisper. The sinks turned themselves on. All 3. Water arced in cold ribbons and hit porcelain with a pitch perfect to 307. The middle faucet stopped and started, matching the slow breath of the voice behind the door. The unflushed bowl went from cloudy to clear and back to cloudy, as if deciding where to focus. The mirror's crack sharpened its line and swallowed a slice of my shoulder. I stood with my hands on the open door and watched the bathroom keep me like a small, guilty pet. I should have run, but I am honest here. Some part of me wanted to watch the mechanism of this wrong thing, because understanding is another kind of escape. I crossed to the stall with my name fogged on it and pressed my palm to the cool metal. The voice inside was me. The breath cadence was mine. The inch of water lapping the threshold matched the water that clung to my cuffs. Don't answer, I said softer. Behind the door, I said, please. It is a special terror to disappoint yourself. I picked up the edge of a metal ruler from where some kid had left it by the hand dryer. I dug the tip into the paint under don't answer and deepened the cuts like a person signing a contract. BA needed another leg. DR wanted a sharper jaw. I carved until the door would remember. If you were there, you would have heard only the sure scratch of paint surrendering and the soft rise of water. Every letter looked like it had already been made, and I was just making it truer. Something in the mirror's cracked line twitched. The clock blinked once like a lizard. I felt a pull in the room, a small tug like when the elevator starts and your stomach forgets its job. The faucet stopped. Silence rushed back like a crowd. I understood then that the bathroom wasn't asking a yes or a no. It was asking for a reply. Answer or don't answer are both answers. The loop expects a posture. I had given it one. The point of no return did not arrive with drama. It arrived when my hand finished the last stroke of the R. The stall latch slid back with a sound like a zipper. The door opened a cautious inch and breathed. Inside the stall, the air was colder, like the room had a refrigerator drawer for certain hours. My own eyes looked back at me from that dim, not precisely mine, just close enough to hurt. The other me stood on the closed lid, shoes dripping. She wore my backpack, but the strap was twisted away I would never tolerate. Her mouth moved in a speaking shape. Don't answer, she said gently, and then she did. She stepped forward the same moment I stepped back. The edge of the door kissed my shoulder. Our movements matched and didn't. We shared a rhythm we hadn't chosen. When her foot touched the water on the floor, it rippled outward and did not touch my shoe. The fluorescent hum found a steady pitch. The clock's minute hand quivered and lowered an invisible degree. The world held its breath so carefully that I could hear the tiny pop of a drop falling from the hand dryer's metal lip to the tile. I stepped aside, and she stepped past me. Her expression was not unkind. It held the concentration of someone late to class and unwilling to run. She kept her head down as she crossed the hall. The door received her with the deference it had denied me. A wet footprint appeared in the corridor, then another. It looked like leaving. Behind me, the open stall began to shut. The voice that was mine and not mine shifted from the doorway to the inside. Knuckles met wood. 3 knocks, almost apologetic. Mr. Oslam turned the corner with that jangle of keys that comforts you until it doesn't. He lifted his radio and frowned at the wet trail. Nadia, you good? He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the space where I had already left according to the reflection in the murky bowl. I stood beside the closing stall and watched him walk to the hall door that now worked in this version of the room. He held it open and called, "I thought you went out this way already." He stared down the corridor at empty air that had my shape. I left then. Maybe that shocks you. I left because the version of me that had won the argument with the door had already gone, and I didn't know which body the building planned to keep. I slipped into the hall as Mr. Oslam trained his attention down the east corridor, searching for me who wasn't there. The bathroom door eased shut behind me with a slow care I didn't earn. From inside, I heard one last polite knock. Then the water sounds settled into the drains like a secret calming itself. Later, on the camera feed, Ms. Qureshi would insist I left at 3:07 and again at 3:07 and again at 3:07. 3 copies of the same minute rendered in gray. She would call my mother and ask if I was playing games with the attendance system. My mother would put her hand on my forehead and ask if I fell off. The faucet at home would start a new drip it never had, a steady click that found my heart and corrected it when I tried to sleep. My watch would pause sometimes, just long enough for the minute to consider becoming 3:07. I still had detention the next day. That is the kind of school we are. The East Wing bathroom had a new sign taped to the door. Out of order. The paper fluttered in the motion of the hallway, though there was no breeze. I walked past with my head high and did not look in. That lasted 8 steps. I turned my head anyway and caught the mirror's cracked edge. For half a second, it did not show me. It showed a stall door with a fog name. The letters were mine. I blinked and saw only tile. After school, I went to throw paper towels away in the West Wing and heard a drip that did not belong there. It counted at 3:07. I thought of the letters I had carved and how the grooves would outlast me. I thought of the other me, leaving wet prints only cameras and security guards care to see. I thought of the way the lock had picked a side. It would be clean to decide I was the one who left, and that was that. But when I walked past the trophy case, my reflection stopped and turned to the east while I kept going. I don't think the bathroom wanted me as a ghost. I think it wanted a reply. The words "don't answer" are still there, carved deep enough to feel with a fingernail. The part of the story I haven't solved is who wrote them first. Some nights, I am sure it was me, with the metal ruler, saving myself backward. Some nights, I think the bathroom teaches that lesson to anybody who lingers in the wrong wing after the last bell. I never figured out where the water came from. It rose without wetting anything that wasn't mine. If you are ever stuck and the clock has no second hand and the faucet borrows your pulse, decide quickly. Open and be seen before something moves above you, or stay and be the voice behind a door telling someone else not to answer. Both are choices. Both work. Both echo. Mine comes back as a drip in quiet rooms. It comes back when a fluorescent flickers the way a throat clears before a whisper. It comes back, soft as a fingertip on a stall, when I hear my name pronounced with too much certainty. I kept my promise to myself and avoided the East Wing for a week. On Friday, I forgot and cut through to save time. A janitor cart leaned alone by the bathroom door, mops standing like a guard. I heard a knock. 3 gentle taps. No one else in the hallway reacted. I let the sound pass me like a person I don't know. As I reached the stairwell, I glanced at the small safety mirror that lets you see if someone is coming up. My reflection stood still in that round, watching the bathroom. She raised a hand like she meant to answer. I kept walking. If you have ever lost a minute and then found it again in a place that should not hold time, you know why I'm careful now. I sleep fine most nights. When I wake at 3:07, I listen, then smile into the dark as if someone could see me do it. I do not answer, not right away. The light finds its hum. The faucet counts my breath until I feel alone. If you have a story that makes you pause outside a bathroom and wait for your own advice to arrive, tell me in the comments so I know you heard me. Now we move on, if you're still with me. Ready for what waits after glass and water and locks that pick favorites? Story 3. The trophy case that exhaled the first time the trophy case breathed on me. It used the warmth you only feel when someone stands close enough to share the same mistake. Not a draft, not the AC, a slow, human exhale from behind glass that should have been colder than a fish tank. and I told myself not to turn around because if I turned, I would have to answer to the thing that had lungs where the school kept its pride. I'm Norm Malik, which will matter in a minute. I was on yearbook duty, trying to shoot a new photo spread of the hallway outside the gym. I needed the case because it's the school's altar. Polished wood frame, brass rails, and rows of relics that smell like metal and furniture polish when the janitors overdo it. I was supposed to show community and legacy, but the light sensors kept dropping me into darkness like I was a rumor being tested, and the case waited at the center like a person holding their breath. Coach Ramos met me there, jangling keys. He's one of those men who can lift a car hood and fix it with the weight of his stare. He tapped the wooden base with the tip of a pen. "Don't lean your weight here," he said. "The bottom's cracked." His voice softened. "They cheaped out in '03. Then he laughed and added, "Case gets warm sometimes. Custodian says it breathes. Heating vent behind it." He looked down the hallway at the blank cinder block. "No vents. Anyway, be quick. Lights go off every 10 minutes. He left me alone with an apology that sounded like a dare. It's petty, but I wanted the photo that would get picked for the cover. Yearbook fights are polite knives. Jay, my best friend, had already submitted a moody shot of an empty science wing. I wanted mine to beat hers because that is how envy admits it loves you. The scholarship committee looks at covers, MS. Lyon says whether they admit it or not. Find a story no one else sees, she always tells me. I stared at the case and waited for a story to move. The first chill I felt was ambition pretending to be weather. I framed the shot. Inside the case, on the left shelf, a small golden whistle was missing from its mount. The imprint of it remained on the velvet, a clean oval where dust hadn't landed. In the reflection, I saw the absence before I saw myself. I made a note to crop around it because holes are hard to sell to committees, then paused anyway because the hole made the picture honest. Above the whistle's empty post, a plaque read A. Malik, Regional Champions 2016. Wrong first initial. My last name. I don't have a cousin here, and we weren't champions. I checked twice, as if the letters would blush and correct themselves. The first fog came while I adjusted my ISO. A circular bloom on the inside of the glass, right at face height, like someone had leaned forward to say a secret and then thought better of it. The hallway behind me was cold enough that my fingers ached, but the fog swelled from within, slow and round, until it nearly touched the brass latch. I wiped my side of the glass out of reflex. My cloth came away clean. Inside the case, the fog wrote a small oval and then cleared, as if the case had realized I was watching. I told myself this would make a better story in the morning. Light sensors click off at the worst moments. The custodian puts a humidifier inside to keep the wood from drying. Coach jokes about breathing. Someone forgot the whistle after a pep rally, and the wrong initial on the plaque is a typo no one has noticed for 9 years. Legacy, Ms. Lyons would say, smiling a little. We inherit errors and keep polishing them until they look like trophies. The smell of brass polish grew sweeter, thicker, as if the case had opened its throat under the shine. 10 minutes passed. The motion lights sighed asleep. Everything went 1 degree darker, the way a theater dims before the overture. The case kept its own brightness, glass catching ambient light like a stage cheekbone. I waved my arms to bring the ceiling panels back to life. They hesitated, then woke in a scatter. When the closest panel buzzed on, a new line of fog traced itself inside. Not a breath circle this time, but a slow, horizontal sigh that crossed the width of the case. My camera beeped a low battery warning, despite starting the night full. I walked along the case, pretending to look for an angle. The wooden base had a crack on the right corner, thin as a healed cut. A sliver of shadow lived inside it, not the kind that belongs to corners, but the kind that belongs to throats. I could smell polish rising through that split, warm and alive, like someone rubbing a coin under their tongue. The trophies shifted their weight when I stopped. It was the gentlest rattle, the kind metal makes when it's excited but pretending not to be. I took a step back and heard it again, a polite chime of brass collars saying hello. I knocked lightly on the glass to tell it to behave. It fogged where my knuckle landed, from the inside first, then the outside as my breath wavered. A tiny, trapped echo came back, high and thin, as if my knock had been replayed through a small chamber. I listened harder and heard another way. Not an echo, a whistle without the whistle, a mouth making the shape. I looked at the empty mount on the left shelf and felt ridiculous for wanting to put something back that wasn't mine to return. If you've ever tried to talk yourself out of the first wrong detail, you know how quickly details line up to be next. The plaque with my last name had skated to the center of its row. I don't mean it jumped. I mean it had been flush left, and now it sat shy of the midpoint, aligning beautifully with the ghost oval where the whistle should have been. I took a step so I wouldn't see it do again. The ceiling panels clicked off in a stagger, and the brightness in the case did not suffer. Motion sensor lights are sleepwalkers. The case looked awake. Something warm touched the back of my neck. Not a hand, not a draft. The clear, generous warmth of a breath that someone wanted me to feel. The exhale lifted the short hair at my nape and made it think of hands anyway. I turned with my whole body before I could tell myself not to. The hallway behind me was a long shot where nothing moved except the dark. I was alone with my camera, the smell of polish, and the case that knew how to mimic blood heat. I laughed once so I wouldn't run. I could have left then. I should have. But I thought of Jay's Science Wing photo, and I thought of the scholarship, and I thought of the plaque sanding my name smooth until it fit here better than I did. The case exhaled again, softer, over my shoulder. I spun back in time to see the fog fold itself away on the inside of the glass, like lips finishing a word. It felt absurdly like manners. The case wanted to talk without being rude, and the absurdity of that held me. "Okay," I said, out loud, to furniture. "You win. One shot. Then I'm gone." I pressed my camera to the glass to cut glare. The lens kissed the cold. A breath printed itself on the inside directly opposite the ring of my lens. Perfect circle, mating perfect circle for an instant, and the fog held. Through that shallow cloud, I framed something I hadn't seen from an inch away. The little plaque above the whistle mount had been turned to face the glass at a dead-on angle. Someone wanted me to read it. I didn't like the word "someone" anymore. The letters were engraved deep, filled with black paint. A. Malik, Regional Champions 2016. A hairline scratch marked the A, like someone had begun to redraw it as an N and then stopped. I heard the trophy rattle again, faint curiosity inside the wood. The smell of polish thickened until it was almost sweet. "There's a vent," I told myself, a back scratcher of a lie for an itch I couldn't reach. Behind the case, the wall was unbroken block, painted school beige. No vents, no grates, no electricity that loves to pretend to be a ghost. The lights went out again, all at once this time, as if the sensors had agreed my movements did not count as life. In the half-dark, the glass held a pail. I lifted my camera and snapped a blind shot. The flash ignited the hallway, bright as a memory you can't live in anymore. For breath, everything was detail, and then I saw it was worse. The flash froze the trophies caught in motion. They were not where they had been before. A track relay baton had rolled forward to the lip. A soccer ball trophy with a plaque for 1998 had pivoted to face outward, its brass tiny faceplate staring like a closed eye pointed right at me. In the back, a row of smaller awards leaned, as if bracing for a shudder. A fine line of fog stitched along the top of the glass. I didn't realize I'd said nope until I heard my nope inside the case coming back delayed, like the room needed time to agree. I took a video in sheer journalistic self-defense. My phone camera flickered just enough to look like a lie later, which is what video does. In the grain, I heard it more clearly. A whistle. For notes, not loud. The pattern the PE teacher blows when he wants the class to freeze. It came from somewhere inside the case, thin and insistent, like breath carving itself through metal without help. I stepped closer, even as my shoulders tried not to. The little empty mount looked smug in the low light, oval and quiet as a missing tooth. "You can't be real," I said, and then I remembered Ms. Lyons saying never tell a story it can't be itself. The case breathed again, longer this time, and my hair tickled the way it does right before a storm. "Jay," I said into the air, bargaining with a person who would later swear she was home watching a baking show. If this is you, you got me. I lifted the latch because I wanted the red herring more than I wanted air. The metal was warm when it should have been school cold. It came up easy with the give of something that had practiced yielding. The door swung an inch and stayed there, glass flexing like a hell breath. Warm air snuck out in a vein and touched my mouth, that kind of intimacy you only get from someone standing right there, and I faltered. I could walk away and risk that whatever was inside had slipped out through the crack in the base already, or I could open the door and tell the mouth to talk to me in the light. 10 minutes were nearly up again. The motion lights clung to their dim stage. I chose what I've always chosen when a story asks for more than I owe. I opened the door. Nothing leapt. The glass door moved with the care of a librarian turning a page. Warmth unspooled, not like a vent, more like a person holding a mug. The smell of polish swam out and made me think of old coins and held hands. The trophies didn't rattle in joy or menace. They settled. I breathed in despite myself. It tasted like brass, like the way your mouth feels after biting a key. Okay, I whispered, because whispering makes you sound like you already believe. Okay, where are you? The answer didn't come in words. It came as a pressure change in my ears, that soft pop you get on elevators when the building decides you should be lower. The glass door exhaled a note of condensation at my cheek, and the fog drew the faintest oval around my mouth. The case wanted to pace my breath. That's the strangest sentence I'll ever say, but it's true. My inhale became its inhale. My exhale came back longer than mine, as if the case had been holding its breath for 9 years and was finally allowed to let some out. I looked at the right corner, at the hair-thin crack in the wooden base, and understood how the warmth had been signing its name on the hallway. The split pulsed once with air, not visible, just felt like a creature testing if it could fit. My mind offered the reasonable answer. There's a heat source in there and a pressure difference. My body offered the memory. A. Malik. The almost N incised under the A. The whistle's 4 notes that only gym teachers blow. I stepped back and said, "You have the wrong person." From the corner of my eye, motion. The plaque with my last name shivered and settled 0.5 millimeter closer to front. I know how easily we imagine movement, but this was the change a spider makes when it chooses the next thread. I snapped another photo to catch the before-after. The flash lit the case, and in that freeze my stomach fell. The plaque did not read A. Malik anymore. It read in Malik, clean and unhurried, paint still glossy, as if a hand had finished the letter while I blinked. I laughed a little, the kind of sound that is also a sob in costume. "No," I said to the letter N. The trophies answered with a quiet necklace of rattles, sympathetic, not unkind. The warmth at my face deepened. The case exhaled so slowly it might have been thinking. I felt the touch of air run across my lips as if learning their shape. The whistle pattern sounded again, closer, not from an object, from the opening itself, air training itself in a song, because that is what we make it do when we force it through an edge. I am not a hero. I am a girl with a camera and a debt to the version of me who wants the cover. But I'm also my mother's daughter. She taught me that when something calls you by name, you decide how it will learn your answer. I took a tiny step, just enough to break the case's pacing of my breath. Immediately, a consequence. The warmth recoiled an inch, embarrassed. The trophies shivered in a reprimand. My name on the plaque darkened like wet ink, taking a new depth. You can say no, the room suggested, but we will go on keeping time. The motion lights died. This time they did not return when I waved. The hallway leaned into its own shadow, and the only glow left was the case, a lake of brightness under glass. My camera battery hit red, and then blacked out with the smugness of objects that decide they're done holding evidence. The open door of the case tugged gently inward even without a draft. "We should close you," I said to it, like to a child's jacket. I reached and felt the warmth take my wrist in the polite way fog takes windows, and my skin remembered being 5. The whistle blew again, the 4-note freeze, and in the hush afterward came a voice, or the closest the case had to one. Not words. The sound of a hallway of breaths added together and played backward. It held the tone of a crowd after a victory. It held the sigh you make when you're finally allowed to rest. Inside the glass, the track batten rolled the last quarter-inch and touched the lip with a tiny metallic kiss. The crack in the base pulsed warmer, as if something living had found seam. I said a thing I didn't know I was going to say. You're not a cabinet. You're a mouth. It felt ridiculous and correct. The case did not disagree. The warmth swelled and steadied. The plaques were the teeth. The trophies made a soft throat music. The missing whistle was a tongue, last seen, then used, then gone. Breath fog from inside over the left panel, a human-sized oval that would have been cheek level for someone taller than me. I thought of 2016 and whoever Malik had been, and whether the initial had always been wrong, or whether the case had only tonight learned my letter better. I could leave and pretend it hadn't learned it at all. I could close the door, walk away, live with the knowledge that a crack in our school keeps the breath of our victories and failures, and sometimes lets it out to find a name that fits. I could open the door wider and lean in and offer my exhale to a museum that had mistaken me for a missing piece. Both choices were forever. That's how I knew I was at the line. You only smell brass this strong when you've brought your blood to the front of your mouth. I closed the door. The case hissed, not angry, exactly, more like a kettle set to low. Warmth washed over the back of my hand one last time, forgiving, then withdrew to the other side, where it belonged. The latch settled with a sound like a throat clearing at a podium. The fog on the inside of the glass thinned, stubborn at the edges, finally resolving into nothing. I held the latch for a slow breath to teach my hands what staying meant. No, I said softly to the mouth. Not mine. The building exhaled in sympathy. A motion panel brought itself back to light. Footsteps sounded around the corner, real human ones with a tired rhythm. The custodian pushed his cart into the hall, humming something so light it almost didn't exist. He saw me and put a hand to his chest. Ah, Ms. Noor, you scared me. He glanced at the case and grinned with the kind of grin adults use when they're about to tell you a story they don't believe. You feel it breathing yet? He asked, like an uncle at a cookout. They say it's the old heat lines. It's warm in cold weather. Funny, right? There's no vent, I said, pointing at the cinder block. He shrugged. Huh. He leaned to wipe a smudge on the inside of the glass, except he was outside with me, and I had not mentioned a smudge. His rag squeaked against the pane. The squeak echoed a half moment later from inside the case, like the sound had traveled to a different lung. He paused, then chuckled and shook his head as if giving himself an instruction to forget. Legend is, it breathes when a name is due. He winked. You kids love stories. He wheeled away, whistling 4 notes without knowing why. I stood alone and stared at the plaque. N. Malik remained clean and black, a finished letter naming me without my permission. It was not my year. It was not my win. The case wanted the surface truth of engraving, not the sticky truth of who I am. I pulled out my phone to call Jay and tell her I'd lost my mind. The screen stayed dead, then flickered on just long enough to display a notification that made no sense. Airdrop. Trophy case would like to share a photo. The little thumbnail was a picture of me taken from inches away, my mouth open as if mid-breath. The prompt vanished before I could accept or scream. Homework and morning and ordinary light would have saved me if I had let them. I didn't. I brought my palm to the glass and left the cleanest print I could, like I was 80 and knew what fingerprints were for. Inside, a twin handprint formed an eye blink before mine. Warmer, larger, the pad of the thumb lined with a groove like someone who whistles a lot. The case exhaled long and soft, a mother putting a baby down. I pulled my hand away and watched the twin fade before my own did, like it lived closer to the heat source and had farther to fall. I left because staying is also a decision. The motion lights escorted me down the corridor a panel at a time until even kindness ran out. I turned once like an idiot in a movie and saw the case watching with its non-eyes, brightness a little stronger than before, fog nowhere and everywhere, a mouth practicing patience. In a stairwell mirror, I caught my breath fog and saw it return. For a heartbeat, the fog made a circle on its own. As if rehearsing a name, I hadn't spoken yet. The next morning, Ms. Lyons emailed the yearbook committee to say the cover shot was mine. "The case looks alive," she wrote, delighted. "No one's ever caught that spirit." Jay slid into the seat beside me during homeroom and bumped my shoulder with hers. "Fine," she said. "It's good. Creepy good. I'll beat you next time." I meant to tell her she could have the cover if she wanted it, that I didn't need my name attached to certain kinds of stories. Instead, I smiled and asked if she had ever noticed our trophy case getting warm in winter. She wrinkled her nose. "Goose. No." After lunch, I walked past the case to see if the plaque had changed back. It hadn't. Malik looked like it had always been there. Someone had repaired the wooden base overnight. The crack was gone, or rather, it had been filled, sanded, polished, and loved, a seam healed to invisibility. I knelt and pressed my ear to the wood anyway, because I am bad at letting go. I heard the tiniest sound, not water, not air, a dry, slow music, like a tongue learned to rub against teeth again. It made me stand up and apologize to no one. I pitched my cover caption as "inherited breath," because I am dramatic when I'm scared. Ms. Lyons laughed and changed it to "where we keep our wins." Jay stole my fries at lunch, and it felt like something I could name. Coach Ramos walked by later and patted the case once, absent a coach's love. "You know," he said, "I looked it up, couldn't find an A. Malik from 2016. He peered at the plaque. Huh, they fixed the initial. Good catch, Noor." The warmth behind the glass lifted as if proud. Coach's hand left a print that did not line up to mine. At home that night, my room smelled faintly of polish when the heater kicked on. I told myself it was the desk varnish warming. I breathed on my window to draw something petty and childish. But before my finger touched the glass, a circle formed, small and neat, the way a mouth makes when practicing the word "we." I wiped it away. It came back softer, lower, near my pillow level, as if learning the height of my sleep. That was when I put my phone face down and stopped checking notifications after midnight. Because sometimes technology tells the truth too literally. If you walk our gym hallway in winter, you'll feel it. A gentle touch at your throat, a reminder of every cheer and loss held in lacquer and glass. Some nights you'll hear the 4-note whistle with no whistle at all, just breath taught to behave. Some afternoons, the case will fog on the inside while you wait for the lights to notice you again. Maybe your last name will be there with a wrong letter that finds you later. Maybe you'll open the door, or maybe you'll let the mouth keep practicing patience until someone hungrier arrives. I'm not trying to scare you away from school pride. I'm trying to tell you that stories don't live where you think. They live anywhere breath collects and refuses to leave. If you ever feel warmth on the back of your neck in a cold hall, don't panic. Pick your posture. The case can pace your breathing, but it can't choose your answer. I chose no, and the echo of that choice writes its way into plaques, into a grain, into notifications that offer you your own mouth. Maybe you'll choose yes and tell me how it tasted. Until then, if you pass by and see in Malik where it doesn't belong, know that the case got my letter right even if it got the year wrong. Know that the crack is gone, which means the breath had to find another seam. If the motion lights click off while you're there, wave your arms like you're alone at a concert. If the glass fogs from the inside and draws a neat oval at your height, lean back. But if you can't help leaning in, tell me later what you thought it was going to say. Take a breath with me before we move on. If a trophy case has ever sounded like it was practicing the word "we" in your direction, drop a comment so I know where the cracks are now. Story 4. The lab door window that wore my face the first time the lab door window moved out of time with me. I blamed the light. That narrow rectangle showed my face like a vertical pond, and when I leaned in, the version of me behind the glass leaned a beat late, as if the hallway and the lab were breathing on different clocks. The chemical smell on the air was faint, a metallic lemon that clung to the tongue. Somewhere down the corridor, a beaker clinked inside a drying rack, lonely and precise. I told myself reflections lag when you are tired, which is a lie that lets you stay. I had reasons to be there after hours. Ms. Bott had let me rerun my spectroscopy makeup, and my scholarship essay was hinged on the perseverance paragraph that would sound fake unless I had a win. The building's alarms are at 6. If you've ever worked under a timer, you know how it sharpens and blurs at once. I kept glancing between my watch and that window, tall and narrow, the kind that makes you feel like your own witness. On the door, a safety poster read, "Always face the glass." The cartoon scientist looked cheerful, like rules are warm. The lab coat on hook 3 wasn't mine. It was a size too big, sleeves rolled messily, someone's name tag peeled off in a white ghost. It hung as if still shaped by a shoulders-out stance. The supply cabinet to the right of the door had a simple key lock and a hiss in its hinge that usually complained at the slightest touch. It was locked tonight. I checked because I always check, because doors that keep their promises are rare. Above the door's window, a faint fingerprint smudge had dried high. Too high for me unless I stood on a stool. It haunted the glass with a lifted whirl. When I lifted my hand, the rectangle gave me my hand back, tilted and slow. "Tap, tap," I said with my knuckles, dumb reassurance for an object. "Tap, tap," came back a half moment later, not like sound through wood, like sound through throat. I stepped back and stared at the poster because I needed someone to agree with me. "Always face the glass," the cartoon said, and it seemed suddenly less like safety advice and more like a training note. Training who? Exactly, I didn't want to ask yet. I set up the cuvettes and pretended the door wasn't a person. The spectrometer hummed with the piece of machines that only know yes and no. The chemical smell grew sharper, as if the lab had uncapped something polite. When I hit scan, my phone buzzed with a text from a mall asking if I'd lock up on her shift. I typed back a thumbs up and felt the timer on my watch louder. 5:11 p.m. The building lights hum in a certain way after 5, like the school lowers its voice. The window painted my outline thin and exact. I smiled at my own joke, and the glass smiled late. I tried the red herring first, because hope is a muscle. "Mr. Dar," I called, half laughing. "If this is you on the inside of the door, I'm sending your prank to the group chat." Mr. Dar is our tech who loves magic tricks and waits until you scream to tell you where the fishing line is. No answer came except the tap. "Talp, talp." This time it was 3 beats, like a hello someone wanted me to return. The fingerprint smudge high on the glass brightened to shade, catching a strip of light like a small sun at the top of a narrow sky. The poster's eyes looked past me. My breath fogged a lighter film on my side, then cleared with the fast apology of warm glass. On the other side, of my eye level, a breath mark ballooned before I exhaled. A clean oval, then gone, as if the air inside the lab had practiced being me. The chemical scent deepened, metallic like a coin under the tongue. My chest tightened with the quiet humiliation of being watched by something that had my face. I didn't want to be the kid who invents hauntings because thin glass behaved like a mirror. I kept working. When I needed the pipette bulbs, I found the drawer empty and swore softly. Hook 3's coat tempted me. I don't borrow lab coats. I like the cool weight of my own cotton, the way it smells like my detergent and not the school's. But the coat looked like an answer, and answers are addictive. I reached. On the other side of the door, in the rectangle, my not-quite reflection reached first, sleeve already rolled to my exact fold. I let my hand fall. The coat stayed swaying, as if a person had just stepped out of it and left air. The clock at the back of the lab clicked with a cheap plastic certainty. 5:18. The window knew my timing. When I looked away, it moved. A faint motion, the way a person breathes with their jaw when they don't want to be seen breathing at all. Always face the glass. A safety rule, a ritual, or a leash. I kept my eyes on the rectangle while I worked a stupid dance of glances and pipetting that was either science or superstition. My shoulders ached from holding 2 worlds open at once. At 5:23, the first real wrong thing happened. My face in the window said my name without my mouth moving. I saw my lips form the word I have heard my entire life, but the sound came a beat late, soft from behind the glass. Hadia. You know the sound your name makes when you hear it said in a room you thought was empty. My back prickled. The chemical smell sharpened until it tasted like battery. I put the pipette down because anything pointed would have felt like blame. I don't have time, I told the window, which is a sentence about a person. The rectangle smiled like it had borrowed my mother's patience. In the corner of my eye, the supply cabinet's latch clicked, then thought better of it. I tried the handle. Still locked, cool metal, polite resistance. I pressed my ear to its door out of boredom and got a kiss of cold that didn't belong in a warm room. It felt like air had been asked to hold still in there. "Why are you cold?" I whispered to a cabinet. In the reflection, my mouth rounded too late. I sent them all a voice note, because proof is a rope. If I'm not out by 5:55, please come knock. The lab is acting weird. I tried to laugh at myself in the second sentence, so the first sentence wouldn't be a prayer. The timer on my watch rolled to 5:30 with a small, joyless chime. The building alarms armed at 6. The glass took my smile and wore it like a found coat. "Tap, tap," it said, right ear close, then left, playful as a kid asking to be let in. I told myself it was a screen on in the lab behind the door, a monitor catching my movement in a lag. I pushed my forehead lightly to the glass to try to see past myself. The rectangle gave me back a forehead just a shade too slow, like it had considered what expression to wear. High up, the fingerprint smudge pressed deeper from the inside, not raised like mine, but indented the way a touch remembers. The smudge had a whirl my fingers don't. I felt the first real itch to run. The hallway behind me didn't offer a better plan. "Okay," I said, reasonable. I opened the door. You become physics again. It sounded like controlling a dog you hope is friendly. I set my hand to the lever. Inside the window, my hand arrived first, gentle on the hinge, already at the wrong angle for the way this door opens. I froze. My breath made a small circle I didn't own. The poster watched me like a witness I don't recall inviting. "Always face the glass." I pulled my hand back. The rectangle smiled, ashamed and pleased in equal measure, then lifted its own hand and knocked. Tap, tap, tap. My choice felt like a rail. Open and give the thing my obedience, or wait and let it learn me from the outside through the shape of my turning away. The stakes ladder built itself without help. If I stayed, the alarms would seal me in and I would be a story tomorrow. If I opened, and it wasn't a mirror, I would be a headline nobody publishes. My scholarship lived in the pocket of doing hard things alone. My sanity lived 2 inches behind my eyes. My body kept checking if my legs were still mine. I chose small. I slid the tiny metal insert of my student ID between door and frame, clumsy at half measures. The lever turned with a smoothness that was not school. The door side inward half an inch, and the rectangle widened, my face elongating, then snapping to a shape that was not a trick. The chemical smell came out sweeter, as if room air had been sitting in a glass forever waiting to be sipped. "Hadia," the soft behind-glass voice said, kinder than I am to myself when I'm tired. I stepped back because the only power I own is space. The immediate consequence was petty and precise. In the window, the version of me wore the lab coat from Hook 3, sleeves already rolled to the messy set I had almost done. I looked down at the hook. The coat still hung where it hung. I looked back up and saw myself shrug into it a second time. You can call it a trick and keep breathing. Or you can admit the room has learned you. The poster's cartoon smile held and held. Always face the glass. The sentence now read to me like an instruction given to the thing in the rectangle, not to me. I texted Amal again and watched the typing dots sit and sit. She sent back a photo from the library. The timestamp at the top of my screen wobbled, then corrected. The rectangle tapped, a cheerful patience. Talp, talp, talp. The triple landed like counting before a race. "No," I said to it, and felt childish. The rectangle bit its lip in my mother's way when she is trying not to cry. The supply cabinet's lock turned by itself with a tidy click. Spoon. The door swung a bare inch on that hissy hinge and breathed cold at my wrist. Inside was nothing. No glassware, no boxes of nitrile gloves, no ancient pH strips that turned brown from time. Nothing but a denser dark and a cold that crawled my skin like 1,000 polite insects. My exhale smoked a fraction in that air. A cabinet cannot be colder than the room unless it knows how to steal. "Who taught you that?" I whispered to Wood. The rectangle answered with my eyes, softened and patient. The red herring stumbled back one last time, waving. Maybe carbon monoxide? Maybe I'm faint, and everything is lag. I pull my detector from my bag like a person carrying a rabbit's foot they swear is practical. The green LED stayed green, the way reality sometimes insists you are not special. 5:41. I had 19 minutes before the building turned me into a guest. "Stop," I said to the glass, half command, half apology. The rectangle nodded in the sweet way a younger cousin does when you pretend your joke worked. Then it mouthed a word I didn't say. "Switch." I can tell you what I should have done. I should have closed the lab door, texted Amal to come down, waited with my back against the poster until human breath arrived. I should have kept my two worlds separate with a handle and a rule. But the thing wearing my face lifted its hand to the inside of the glass and splayed its fingers in a request that is older than language. "Please." I raised mine without choosing. The cold through the pane met my heat. The tap I felt wasn't sound. It was the tiny pressure of being matched. When our palms met, the glass felt thin. Not melt, not give, not myth. Just a membrane that had had a long day. The fingerprint smudge high above pressed deeper, as if someone taller leaned in to watch us decide. My watch buzzed 5:48, and my heart took that as permission to hurry. The rectangle smiled, as if it owned the time anyway. Always face the glass. The poster advised no one in particular. I stepped closer, and the chemical scent bloomed, metallic citrus, like a coin dipped in lemon. For a second, I thought of the spectrometer humming bravely at my back and tried to anchor myself to numbers. The rectangle moved first. It stepped forward without the door opening farther, the way somebody approaches you through a crowd without the crowd moving. My brain broke the motion into slow frames to give itself mercy. Cheek, shoulder, coat, my coat, not mine. Hook 3's coat moved without leaving the hook. I chose big. I yanked the door wide. Warmth spilled out like a body. Not hot, not cold anymore, exactly the temperature of skin after a shower, a perfect human medium. The lab air pushed soft into the hallway. In that draft, the coat on hook 3 lifted and turned like it had a spine, then stilled neatly, empty as a smile. My not reflection stood inside the threshold and did not cross. Up close, I saw the mistake that had been haunting me. It wasn't me. She looked exactly like me the way a song on a phone speaker sounds exactly like an orchestra. The shape was mine, the teeth the scar under my chin from the bike crash in 7th grade. The pupils were too steady. The timing was perfect. The little loose hair my real body fights with had already fallen into a prettier place. She raised a hand and tapped the glass with 2 fingers from the inside. Not on my side anymore, a polite goodbye before hello. Amal called. I fumbled the answer on speaker. "I'm 2 minutes away," she said, voice shivering with effort. "You said 5:55. I'm early. Don't be weird." Footsteps carried under her breath. The rectangle's head tilted like a bird hearing a faraway sound. I kept my eyes on her and closed my hand on the door lever, because sometimes that is what human looks like. "I'm fine, Edith. Lab's fine," she said. "Okay." In that way, that means she is not going to believe me later. "Switch," the girl in the rectangle said again, this time with my voice through water. She stepped forward until her forehead almost touched mine. If glass had not been between us, we would have kissed in the sad way actors sometimes do in old movies when the city separates them. She smelled like the lab. She smelled like everything clean, trying to hide metal. I thought of the cabinets empty cold. I thought of my scholarship essay and the word perseverance and wondered if I was practicing it wrong. I put my mouth near the glass and whispered, "No." It felt like telling a mirror you don't accept returns. Immediate echo. Her smile didn't crack. It softened, like I'd confirmed a preference she expected. Her left hand dropped out of the rectangle's frame. For a second, I thought she'd given up. Then a tap sounded behind me that was not from glass. "Talp! Talp!" At my back, 3 fingers landed on the window that looks into the lab from the other hall. Spoon. Amal stood there, winded and frowning, her palms slapped against that rectangle late. I waved at her, relief like a flood. She pointed down the hall in a frantic gesture. "You just walked past," she mouthed through the glass, confused. "You didn't see me." She held up her phone with the camera feed paused. The screen showed me, backpack and all, crossing the atrium, and pushing the front doors open into evening. The timestamp read 5:52. The me in the frame wore Hook 3's coat and walked like my body on a good day. Amal looked from the video to the door window to me like she'd been given 3 math problems and 1 answer. That was the delayed consequence arriving early. The building had already decided who left. Behind the lab door window, my not reflection watched Amal with a pity I hated. She lifted 1 finger and drew, slow, on the inside of the glass at eye level. The words fogged and cleared like a throat. Always face the glass. It wasn't a rule for me. It was a rule for her, a reminder that as long as I kept my eyes on her, she could not step through my inattention. I understood then why the smudge was high. Someone taller had learned this lesson too late and left their print as a star. The cabinet's cold breathed at my calves, as if the empty space had things to say. My watch buzzed 5:56. For minutes to choose the story I would be tomorrow. Amal banged the other window with her flat palm. "Come on," she said, voice muffled. "The alarms." "Padilla, come on." The girl in the rectangle mouthed my name with real affection. I believed the affection more than I believed the room. That scared me. I closed the door. The rectangle's face did not change. Her hand pressed flat to the glass as my hand had earlier, matching, patient. I flipped the lever. It settled into the frame with a sound like a small decision clicking into place. "No," I told her again, and I meant us both. In a narrow pane, she nodded once, a dancer taking a correction, then stepped back. The lab grew a fraction colder on my side for 1 long breath, as if something had leaned against the paneling and stopped pretending to be air. Amal and I ran. We made it through the atrium at 5:59, the security panel watching us the way a dog watches children decide their speed. At the front doors, the sensor read us as inside and hesitated. The me in the camera had already gone. The second me in real time got 1 door open. Amal held the other. The alarm chirped once, unhappy. The chemical smell followed us like politeness. The air outside hit my face like a correction. We stood under a sky that looked like it had not been in a lab. That night, my friends texted me screenshots of the camera feed, and 2 different students swore they'd wave to me on the steps while I was standing in the hall with Amal begging the panel to accept my code. My mother said she saw me on the bus that my body did not take. "Funny," she said over tea. I waved, and you didn't wave back. She momed the exact angle of my not wave, which was my wave when I'm thinking too hard. My scholarship essay sat open on my laptop with the word perseverance spelled correctly and meaning nothing. The next day, Hook 3's coat was gone. Ms. Bott said she had never liked that coat. The sleeves were wrong. It made the students look like they had borrowed their shadows. The fingerprint smudge high on the window had been wiped, but when the afternoon light slid a certain way, the shadow of its whirl returned like a watermark. The supply cabinet made its hiss on an empty hinge and breathed cold any time I passed. I told myself a story about drafts and old seals and saved the harder story for the place that collects them. If you walk by Lab 213 at dusk, you'll see the poster. Always face the glass. You want to take the advice even if you don't know who it's for. The tap-tap will come softly, almost playful, almost polite. If you look away, even to be brave, notice what moves in the frame when you come back. If you see your mouth shape your name before you feel your throat move, be kind. That version of you wants out the way you want out of your life on the bad days. Bringing her into yours is a decision you can only make once. I still pass the lab some evenings. The rectangle keeps its height. Sometimes I press my palm to it and feel warmth find me, equal and measured, as if the glass learned my temperature and kept it like a ringtone. Amal refuses to wait on that hall anymore, but once in a while I'll catch her glancing and checking the camera feed like she's watching 2 stages at a play. The building loves its timers. The alarm's arm at 6. When the panel chirps in the atrium, the window brightens faintly in the corner, like a person at a party who finally spots the friend they came for. I don't have a clean ending to sell you. That is a different kind of channel. I have a last image that still sits in my mouth when I try to sleep. A week after, I woke at 2:12 a.m. to the scent of lemon on metal. I went to the kitchen to drink water and caught my face in the microwave door. It wore the wrong coat. Not mine. sleeves rolled a little messier than I would roll them. I laughed at myself and breathed on the glass. The fog took a second to decide where it belonged. It chose both sides, mine first, then a quick, practiced echo that felt like a room finishing a lesson. If you've ever had glass remember you too well, tell me. If a window has ever learned your timing and offered it back like a gift, I'm listening. And if you've stood under a safety poster that reads like a spell, watch what happens when you obey. Which ending did you want from me when the lever turned in my hand? Tell me in the comments, so the next person knows what story you would have chosen for them. Now, if you're ready to keep going, we'll step quietly to the last one for tonight. Story 5, Locker 213 and the Polished Smile. The first time Locker 213 smiled at me, I wasn't smiling back. The hallway was empty after practice, sickly lights buzzing, and my face in the brushed metal came back warped and cheerful like someone had stretched my mouth with invisible fingers. I blinked at the weak reflection. It kept grinning a second too long, the way a person does when you've already turned away. If you've ever seen your own expression hang in place after you've moved, you know the kind of wrong I'm talking about, soft and sticky like gum under a desk. I am Sada. I carry a mint in my bag because I hate the taste of old gym air. The mint smell cuts through the hall when the vents kick on, and I thought that's why it felt clean near 213. Coach likes us to use the East Quarter lockers at night, so he can lock one wing at a time. Less to worry about, he says, jangling his keys with a joke that sounds like a warning. These lockers remember faces. Make sure it's one you want to keep. I laughed, but I laughed wrong, like a person practicing a smile. There's a dent near 213 in my mouth height, a shallow curve like a grin pressed into aluminum. I noticed it in September and thought of kids slamming their shoulders for attention. Tonight the dent looked deeper, wide enough to hold a thumb. A note poked from the vent slits like a tongue. Don't polish it. Someone had written in the panicky caps of a person who forgot how to whisper. Custodian stories say toothpaste takes scuffs off metal. I used that trick on my phone screen once. The mint smell didn't belong to my pocket anymore, and I knew it, but denial is a sport. 213 had no padlock. Everyone else's did, ugly combinations with taped flags and initials. The empty latch made me feel like I'd walked in on someone changing. I glanced up the hall for Mr. Farid, the night custodian. He told me once the lockers hold heat weirdly, like they breathe after a day of opening and closing. They remember hands, he said, tapping one with his knuckles. Sometimes faces. He laughed right after, but the kind of laugh people use when they think you won't believe them anyway. I tucked the note back where I found it and told myself to hurry. My reflection tilted when I did, then steadied too wide. I lifted a hand to test the metal like a person checking a pan in a thrift store. The surface felt cool and oily from years of palms. Smudges sketched a crescent where a smile would sit, and under the grime ran that dent, smooth as a thumbprint. The mint smell sharpened the closer I leaned. If you've ever stood too close to a stranger with perfect teeth, that same sharp clean meets you, intimate and wrong. I pressed away, and my reflection's grin held a heartbeat longer than my face did, too cheerful in the dead light. The first slam came from down near the water fountains, a normal locker slam with that hollow echo that tells you the hall is bored. Then another, closer. Then another. I told myself a door closer had finally given up on the math of closing. I told myself the vents were burping, or a teacher was making rounds. Sound travels weird in empty schools, you know this. But each slam had a voice, like punctuation coming nearer to finish a sentence that hadn't been written yet, and 213 waited at the end with its empty latch open like a mouth. I wiped my hand on my jacket and fished for my own padlock, the cheap chrome one with a sticker of a moon. The dial turned under my thumb. I hooked it through 213's latch, then hesitated because something about a lock on an empty mouth felt like kindness or cruelty. I wasn't sure. The missing padlock meant it was never meant to be locked. The thought felt like a line I hadn't earned. The dense grin shone slightly where my sleeve had brushed it. You can tell yourself that's nothing until it presses its cheek into your hand. The mint smell bloomed. I reached into my bag for my toothpaste-sized bottle of metal polish I use on trumpet valves when band kids leave the practice room gross. Don't polish it, the note said, which is exactly what you think as you twist a cap. I squeezed a pee on the cuff of my sleeve, thinking I'd wipe only the locker to the left, not 213, not the weird one. But my arm drifted. We're drawn to what's forbidden because yes is magnetic. The cream hit 213's grin dent and buffed easy, clean, and bright. The metal smiled sharper, a new white under streetlight. Times like this, you know you've made a choice you can't unmake. The immediate consequence was small. My reflection's mouth curved the way I just buffed it. The smile suddenly edged crisp as a drawn line. It fit my face badly, like a borrowed mask a size too tight. I stepped back, heartbeat stupid, and the smile stayed. I'm not smiling, I said out loud, to make the world agree. The metal showed me smiling anyway. The slam down the hall moved closer, rhythmic now, left, right, like someone closing lockers in time with me, walking slower and slower toward a thing that didn't need me to move to find me. I pulled the note out again to force my eyes on a paper. Don't polish it. The handwriting shook. A thin V of toothpaste dotted one edge where a thumb had pressed. There was a second line I hadn't seen in the first glance, like ink bled and late. It looked like it read, "Don't polish it open," or "Don't polish it open." English can be a coin with two faces. The mint smell lapped my tongue with a cool, fake clean kiss. "Coach," I called, soft like a house whisper. I wanted a prank, even a mean one with a person behind it. No answer came except the next slam. One locker door, 2 sections down, swung shut with a squeal and held. Fresh toothpaste streaks gleamed faintly on its face like fingerprints teaching themselves. The slams became a line marching toward 213. Spaces closing between periods in a text you don't want to read. My padlock hung loose in my hand, moon sticker turning under the light like an eye trying to find something to believe. I hooked the lock through 213's latch and spun the dial to catch. The latch kissed the hasp and stuck like gum. I tugged. It wouldn't take. The gap refused to close that last sweet millimeter. You know how a door sometimes pushes back because the house is crooked? This wasn't that. This was a mouth that knows you're trying to shut it while it smiles. The dent seemed deeper, just enough to make the gap wrong. My lock dangled useless, a charm on a bracelet you don't remember choosing. I filmed it, because if you don't, later you don't trust yourself. The camera caught my reflection in the brushed steel, laughing when I wasn't. Watching that laughter climb my cheeks while my real face stayed flat made me feel how a rabbit must feel when it recognizes a fox in a window. I raised my phone to hide my mouth behind it like a shield. In the screen, my reflection in the locker smiled around the rectangle of my phone. Too wide, a shape that shouldn't fit inside the metal frame. The slam behind me reached a new cadence, not closer now, but circling like a song learning harmony. I did the dumbest thing. I polished more. It's a reflex like wiping a mirror that keeps hazing. A small circle, then another, each pass wiping a smile brighter with the rhythm of my hand. 213 rounded my movement and sharpened its grin to a clean, photo day curve. We're trained to buff what looks dull until it returns our face back flatter and kinder. The polish dried with a chalky edge that my sleeve erased, and the metal shone like a new tooth. I wiped at my real mouth with the back of my wrist because it felt dirty to be that clean. "Sarah," someone called from the far end. "Do you know the way your bones recognize your own name?" That and midair are a bad combination. It was Mr. Farid, keys like rain in his hand, pushing his cart. 9 o'clock lights in 5, he said, voice bright to make it friendly. "You need me to lock that for you?" He gestured lax at my useless padlock. I raised it to show him. "It won't catch," I said, laughing too loud. He shrugged, came closer, then stopped short 3 lockers away with a small frown. "You smell that?" he asked, sniffing. "Toothpaste." He tilted his head at me, as if I'd been brushing secrets. "It's not me," I said, and he grinned with the easy rhythm of a man who likes to poke kids into telling him truths. "You know the trick?" he asked, nodding at the bright patch. "Toothpaste on metal, but don't overdo it. These things remember faces." He winked and went to close a locker stuck open near the fountains. His cart squeaked away. As the steps faded, a new slam came from the other direction. I realized I couldn't tell anymore which sounds were his and which belonged to a hall trying to finish a thought. I held my phone up again and saw the reflection of my reflection smudged into a mirror world behind me, smiling patient. When I lowered it, 213's mouth held. That is how I knew the machine was running without me. The smile didn't need my face to copy. It needed my look to choose. If I stared long enough, it would keep that shape. If I looked away, would it come with me? You know that dread loop where you test the rules while telling yourself you aren't? I stepped sideways, not breaking eye contact, and 213 slid with me, the grin drifting across the curve as if mounted on a hidden track. At 8:57, the lights at the far end hiccuped. They do that flirt before they go. I told myself to leave, even if my books weren't inside. I could carry. I could be messy and alive. Then the third beat in Detention landed. Lockers began slamming shut in sequence, one after the other, starting deep in the wing I had just left, a long zipper closing. The sound ran toward me, skipping not a single steel door, and when it reached 215 to my right, it paused like a throat deciding how to swallow. 213 popped open a half-inch with a soft, wet sound that should have belonged to mouths. A ribbon of colder air slid out from the seam and touched my lips. You know how it moves? Like a cool hand from inside your throat. The smell was strong, spearmint and something else. A sweetness under it that made me think of white strips and dentist paper. The polished smile on the metal yawned a little wider, the dent pulling down into a dimple that wasn't a dent anymore. The note in the vent slits fluttered like a tongue as the exhale passed. Don't polish it, it whispered to itself, paper talking because it had to. Choice time. Open and face whatever had found my face, or walk away and let it follow in every reflection until I forgot which version of me had teeth. I heard my mother's voice telling child Sarah to stop smiling too hard in photos because it looks like I'm apologizing. I heard Coach say, push through. I heard Mr. Fard's keys like rain. I lifted my lock and tried again. The latch refused. I wrapped my hand around 213's edge and pulled. Inside, it wasn't dusty notebooks and a forgotten jacket. It was bright, as if a small light lived in there, humming a soft blue. My mint gum fell from my pocket into the locker and stuck half out of its foil on the metal shelf, a coin offering. The air inside smelled Easter egg clean and raw. On the inner door, at my mouth height, someone had buffed a bright oval in the steel, as shiny as a mirror. My face slid into it like water, and in that round, I was smiling perfectly glossy as a toothpaste ad. It's just light, I told myself, because red herrings use science when they can. Reflection angles, new paint, the way brushed metal hides pictures until you stroke it the right way. But I don't stroke metal. I'm not the one polishing the inside of lockers after hours. I touched the oval with my finger. The steel was warm, warmer than the hull, warmer than skin. Heat meets men a certain way. It tasted like a lolly at the dentist. I jerked my hand away, and the glossy mouth in the oval didn't flinch. It kept my smile, loitering on my face after I'd taken mine back. I tried to shut the door. It stuck mid-swing, catching on the air like a tongue. My padlock bounced against the latch with a childish clack. The polished mouth on the inside stayed bright. The one on the outside mirrored it, twins facing. The slam sequence finished somewhere behind me, and for a second, everything was closed but 213, and I was the hinge. The lights hummed their soft warning breath. 8:59 blinked on my phone. Okay, I told the hallway, because sometimes you stage whisper to make your fear less real. Okay. I made the wrong choice by accident. I took the sleeve I'd already used and buffed the inner oval once, quick, like wiping a mirror before a photo. The polished mouth shone cleaner, edges crisp. I felt a small pressure in my cheeks, almost like the way a yawn hurts if you hold it. My phone camera flipped unbend my face. In the screen, I watched my mouth curve slow, obedient, a smile moving my muscles without my thought. I dropped the phone on reflex. It bounced against my shoe and lit the inside of the locker like a camp lantern. Something breathed from inside, cool and mint, and the dent outside sighed deeper, as if metal had learned a trick. Sarah, Mr. Fard's voice called, closer now, urgent. Keys rattled. He turned the corner and stopped when he saw me mid-bow to a locker, ridiculous and priestly. "Lights," he said, apology and command tangled. The hallway clicked dark, then lifted to the low emergency hum that paints everything a shade of bruise. In that soft dark, 213 smiled, so clean it flashed, like a tooth under stage lights. My throat tightened in self-defense. "Walk away," I told myself out loud. I stepped back. The smile did not fade. It followed my retreat in the metal with perfect suspension, then stayed when I turned my head like it had decided. That was when the echo arrived. Across the corridor, the trophy case glass caught my shape and smiled back with the same polished mouth, even though the rest of my face frowned. The water fountain bubbler's chrome did it too. 3 surfaces agreeing on a lie is a conspiracy. My stomach lifted like the drop in a ride. I slammed 213 shut. It clicked willing for the first time, like cooperation when it's too late to matter. My padlock slid through on the first try and caught. I spun the dial hard enough to hurt, childish and victorious. "Good," I said. "Stay." The dent showed my grin in razor clarity through the metal, and for a second, a hairline wider curve pressed from within, like a mouth licking its teeth. "You okay?" Mr. Fard asked, hand hovering. "Mint," I said. "Someone's been messing with toothpaste." He sniffed. "They always do. It never sticks." We both looked at 213. The paste had stuck, and the shine was beautiful. I went home with my jaw tight. In the window on the bus, my face rested neutral, but the ghost of my mouth on the glass smiled back and held. In the black mirror of my phone, the front camera caught my lips curve and then freeze while I scrolled angry. I brushed my teeth too hard because that's what you do when you think clean will fix it. My gums felt sore in the places the locker had chosen. When I spit, the foam made a smile on the sink porcelain before it slid away. The delayed echo kept arriving where it wanted. At school next morning, Jay made a joke in homeroom and pointed at me. "Look at you," she said. "Finally happy." I wasn't. In the chrome of the lab sink, I was. In the vending machine window, I caught a perfect grin on my face while I fed it coins with a flat mouth. "Weirdo," I told my reflection lightly, using humor like a towel thrown over a birdcage. My reflection didn't blink. I brought a different sleeve to school and tried to dull 213 with a smear of dust. "Don't polish it," the notes said, and I obeyed backward. The more grime I left, the more the smile underneath gleamed, like it had learned to show through. Mr. Fard passed with his card and paused to look at the locker like it owed him money. "We should repaint that one," he murmured. "Doesn't keep a matte like the others." He tapped it gently. The dent smiled deeper, the sound ringing a little sweet, like tapping a glass you know will sing. The red herring fought for relevance. "New stainless coating," I told myself. A chemical in toothpaste interacts with a brushed finish. Pressure dents reflect brighter. Coach wheeled the basketball cart by and bumped 211. The entire column shivered. A cold mint breath touched my cheek. There was no toothpaste in the gym. Do you know the difference between reasons and answers? Reasons let you sleep. Answers make you choose what to do awake. That afternoon, I decided to end the story, which is another word for making it worse. I brought a tiny can of solvent from the art room and a clean, soft cloth. I waited until the hall emptied and the 9 p.m. timer felt like a cliff. I unlocked 213 and opened it all the way. Inside, the bright oval waited like a mouth. I held the cloth up, solvent bite in my nose, and watched my reflection in the oval smile, preemptively grateful. "No," I said, steady. "I'm just wiping you dull." I wiped. The solvent streaked the shine into a cloudy halo. For a breath, I saw my mouth return to me, a human shape with corners. Then the mint rose, cool as a hand on a fever forehead, and the cloud thinned as if buffed from the other side. The smile came back cleaner than I'd left it, deeper cut, honest in a way I hated. A second patch inside the door brightened at nose level. A third, tinier eye. The inner surface held 3 bright islands now. And in them, I watched my face assemble piece by piece into a mask that glinted when I breathed. I slammed the door. It bounced off air, then shut on the second try with an easy click. The outside dent beamed, the crease of it crisp enough to cut. The lights went and came, the hallway choosing moody. The slam march started again from far down, and I stood with my back against cold metal and told myself I wasn't scared. My phone buzzed a video from friend. "We're doing polish smile check, you in?" The filter dragged my mouth wide in a glossy arc. Everyone laughed, perfect teeth. I watched my face lock their heartbeat after the filter ran out, and I threw my phone into my bag like a person swatting a bee. I didn't open 213 again that night. I walked away. Sometimes that's the bravest failure. The polished smile followed anyway, in every thin shine. When I laughed for real later, I felt my lips catch on the way down like skin snagged on a thorn. In the bathroom mirror at home, it was fine. In the chrome handle, the smile decided to stay. My mother asked at dinner why I kept my mouth shut so tight while she told a story that deserved better. "Headache," I said, and she waved a hand, not believing in believing. The water in my glass grinned back as I lifted it, then went smooth when I swallowed, which somehow made it worse. "You want a clean twist? So here it is." The smile isn't 213's. It's mine, chosen in a moment when I gave the metal my attention and a mint clean touch. The locker keeps a face the way a camera keeps a flash, adoring a person more than they deserve. The padlock was never meant to fit because you cannot shut a mouth that decides to keep talking. Mr. Farid's joke wasn't a joke. These lockers remember faces. They remember the shine, not the ache behind it. When a note begged don't polish it, it wasn't purity. It was mercy. The last thing I'll give you is a picture I didn't take. A week on, I walked the east corridor early, sun just fine in the high windows. 213 stood quiet, mad again to anyone who didn't know what to see. Kids hustled past, slamming lockers with the punctuation of mornings. In the low light, a dozen doors smiled faintly all at once, dent crests catching dawn. Not big, not scary, just clean, too clean, the way a mouth looks when it's been told to behave. As I passed, each smile brightened the smallest notch, and the mint air stirred, as if the hall had taken a breath that remembered me. If a reflection has ever kept your mouth after you left, tell me in the comments. If you have ever polished something and felt it polish you back brighter than you wanted, I'm listening. And if you pass an unlocked door and think locking it will make you safe, check whether there's a dent shaped like a grin where your face would be. If there is, leave it dull. Leave it alone. Leave enough dark for your real expression to find you. That's the last one for tonight. That's all for tonight. 5 stories of schools, mirrors, and reflections that don't always give back what you expect. If you made it this far, thank you for listening in the dark with me. Which one left the sharpest mark? Was it the dance studio mirror that whispered your name? The bathroom clock that froze at 3:07? The trophy case that exhaled? The lab window that wore a face too well? Or the locker that smiled a little too clean? Tell me in the comments. I want to know which story you think you could have survived and which one would have kept you. If this left you looking twice at your own reflection tonight, do me a favor. Like the video, subscribe to Whispering Abyss, and tap the bell so you never miss the next descent. And remember, if the glass breathes back, don't answer.